Thank you. Older people have a tendency to talk of old days, history, and sometimes make their speech longer than necessary. I hope I don't do it here today. But I'm older than most of you, so I may, please stop me when I'm gone talking. Dear participants, dear valuable cultural ambassadors, and I hug you from my heart. I'm hoping that we work for the benefit of all humankind. By now, I am sure we all agree that education, culture, music, and arts are all important factors in keeping up close relationships and peace among nations in a multicultural world. This is an age of globalization. Our horizons are widening up. There are more exchange, and yet meeting others outside our close circles forces us to learn to live with the differences. It must teach us how to live with the others. What we go through life, decisions, both ours and others, direct us to peace or harmony, social harmony, or to wars and violence. Now we say we are out of the age of wars and cold wars, and what is waiting for us? It's a question. One of the things I quote, and I have quoted in my artwork, is life is what we make of it. What do we make of it? This is one of my works, so you can look at it while I'm talking away. It's about peace, bird, and flying, that sort of a thing. And life is what we make of it. That's a summary. Then I want to quote another sentence from Mevlana, a Sufi philosopher and poet from the 13th century, who was 2007 personification for UNESCO. Mevlana said, "Come whoever you are." He doesn't care whether you are this or that or that or this. Come whoever you are. And this is a very important thing. Can we invite everyone? Can we be with others? Can we accept all people? Can they all accept us as we are? This is a question. And I wish we are all as mature as Mevlana is. The discussions of culture and cultural politics, some with positive, others with negative approaches, have been accelerating in the recent years of globalization. If the very simple definition of culture is everything man has created versus nature. This is a very Marxist statement, by the way. Everything man has created versus nature is culture. It includes everything from our beliefs to money, from intangible to the very materialistic world we live in. The difference is mainly how we do the things we do. Individuals, groups, communities, and nations live first by their parents' teachings, later rights and wrongs, good or bad, legal or illegal, of the groups we live in, the societies we live in. When we talk of cultural policies, we do not necessarily mean guided cultural politics of the authoritative regimes. We are talking about another kind of cultural politics. It's wider, it's democratic, it's living one's right. Artists with their creativity are the ones living their rights all the time. No matter what it is, they are expressing themselves in their artwork. Sometimes they have some problems like selling the works or being very popular with the works they do. Then they end up doing the same thing over and over again. And money is the only thing that stops them from being the creative people, using their own rights. The rest is so-called viewers or spectators or audience of the arts and culture, or sort of living on the limits of the culture, are limited by their income, by money, by interest, by education, cultural upbringing, and the influences of cultural life rotated by the ministries, universities, private sector, and NGOs. Now, we hope to educate all, raise the living standards of all, respect the rights of all, end wars, and live in peace. And who are we? Now, we are living in a world of creativity where almost everyone can do whatever they want to. But are we doing the creative activity for the purpose of making other people be more educated, more involved, more acceptable to others and accepting to others? We have to ask the questions. In the recent talks, we talked about art and politics in different ways, and I wanted you to remember that artists, musicians, culture people all like to believe the artistic expressions are strong enough to cross cultural barriers, to make a dialogue between cultures. Now, this is the beginning. Now, the next thing, I want to talk about a bit about Turkey, going back, being old, and the history of Turkey, and what we have done from the Ottoman period to today in 2-3 paragraphs. Now, Turkey is generally accepted as a peripheral country, as well as a bridge between Europe and Asia. Its geographical importance is accented by its being both a center and a passage of multicultural societies with Muslims, Christians, Hebrews, going back to paganism and shamanism, and ethnic groups of different backgrounds. Anatolia is really a bridge. We have Neolithic cultures there, all sorts of cultures coming from the east and coming from the west. And the other day we were said we have the best of Greek architecture in Turkey. I think you said it, I believe. And it was really pleasant to hear that. Now, the Turks, as soldiers of Muslim Selçuklu, they were actually forced to become soldiers for the Selçuklu's, fighting into Anatolia, Asia Minor, and then they started to become themselves a power of some kind and moved on to the Bosphorus and Balkans in the early 12th century AD. And from then on, Turkey became a very important factor in the world power strategies. Ottomans became an empire threatening Christian Europe, Islamic Middle East, and Northern Africa. This is one fact. The other fact that's very interesting is that the Turkish tribes, with their nomadic culture, did not really force their culture on the communities they were taking over. They had a representative of the empire sort of administering the area. The biggest thing that I can think of that didn't sound right by today's standards is that they didn't force the religion on the people, but they did take the eldest son of each family to be taken to the court in Istanbul, where he was trained as the member of the palace. So the palace and the army was made of young people who were taken away from their parents. They weren't really forced into Muslim religion, I don't think so. And eventually, many of these people became the leaders of the Ottoman administration system. So that was something quite different than most things that Europe has been doing. But yet, I must accept the fact that Ottomans were a threat for the Christian Europe for many years. The Westernization of Ottoman Empire, interestingly enough, started at a time when the state was losing its power on the lands it had under its control. The Sultan family had decided that they had to take up with the Western education, with the Western standards. And that is the end of the 18th century when they decided to change the military system. And by mid-18th century, the people had to realize they had to change many other things in their system. One of the most important things was the education. So they had Germans, they had French people coming especially to set new systems in Turkey. And also the Turkish people in the Ottoman family and close to young people, also close to the palace, were sent to Europe to study system or to educate some of that young group. So what happened is that the Westernization of the Ottoman Empire started when they were really losing grounds in Europe, and they were feeling that there was something wrong with their system. And I think this is a very important thing, that after the nomadic culture's adjustment to wars, there was something else moving on, that they had to be with the rest of the world or West. Okay, so the education system, museums, protection of cultural heritage came about the same time. The first art school was established in 1883, and the first Sultanate Museum that was established in 1846 was improved to be opened as a very important archaeological museum in Istanbul in 1911. So we were moving on as the Easterners, trying to be Western. Further developments in the area of arts, education, museums continued when the Ottomans were losing ground. So we have a new nation starting 1920. 1920 is the foundation, is the founding of the Turkish Republic, and Atatürk is the leader. He had slogans for all of the nation. Peace for all was one thing. He was for peace. And that's why we did not enter the Second World War until the last, 4 or 5 days, something like that. And catching up with the present civilizations was another statement he kept repeating. And he kept also saying, Turks are industrious, Turks are very smart. He was like a father. He wanted to keep repeating so you would consider yourself a very intelligent and industrious person, full of love and peace. Okay. So the emphasis was on the cultural life, changing education system and the laws. And you know what we did? We looked at the French and Swiss system. And our civil laws are very much taken after these two countries' systems. Education and culture was organized under one ministry, under the Ministry of Education, as it was in France at the time. The emphasis on cultural structure was aimed at the education regardless of the poor economic conditions. Turkey was so poor, the rural areas were so poor that they could not, the families could not send their children to the schools in the larger areas. So what he suggested was to set up village institutes. And village institutes is something that would be built up with the aid of the people living in the village and teaching them, teaching children, teaching the adults how to build a house, how to build a building, and then start teaching in that. And they had to learn how to raise vegetables and other things and take care of the animals. So he started with the idea that you had to educate the people within the environment they live in. Another that was interesting was the relations among the Anatolian cultures and Turks. For some reason, Atatürk wanted to say, we have connections with Hittites. So the research kept going on. There was a lot of research done at the time. It's not so. The Turks came from Mid-Asia, but there was a lot of research done on the history. And he set up institutions for that, institutions of research that continues up till now. And he also had that we were very lucky. Books of classic literature was translated and published in Turkey and was distributed for very low prices. And another thing is that we had academicians from Europe come to set new schools or change the system, improve the system. But because of the Second World War, again, we were very lucky not to have any kind of religious negative feelings. We had a lot of Jewish people coming, Hebrew people coming to Turkey, German Jews coming to Turkey and helping us with the education. This happened in the arts, in the architecture, and in city planning. And so it was all very important that we had all these people wanting to get away from Germany, come to Turkey and stay with us. And in fact, some of them stayed on to become citizens. Now, Turkey joined UNESCO in 1950s. We had become part of Europe through NATO and through UN. So when we became a UNESCO member in 1952, that's several years after it was founded, the cultural developments in parallel with Turkey's mission and strategies continued until the end of the one-party administration in 1950. Atatürk was dead in 1938, and so we had a new development, but also moving on in his steps. But we had problems with the idea that in order to be democratic, you could not have only one party, you should have a multiple party system. But what's interesting is that when this other party, Democratic Party, took over, the policies changed. So the Westernization, nationalism, and now we were supposed to be more liberal. But what happened is that when we were more liberal, when we didn't have that apparent policies, we ended up moving back into a system where we wanted to see more of the religion. So it was, we wanted to be a secular nation all this time, growing up on what we have seen in the West. And now we are moving, because we are more liberal now, we are moving back into a system that's called secular, but it's also combining religion into the activities. What's interesting is that we have, I was a child at then, 1960, we had the first so-called revolution, the military taking over to stop what was happening, because the Democratic Party had closed down the village institutes, had closed down the city halls that was practically in every city for informal education, which was very helpful to the people. And so it was closing down some cultural centers, educational centers. Mainly, they did not want discussion among the people. These were the places where people would be discussing with each other. So they were closed down. And the strange thing is that it was said at the time that these were communist institutions, having public buildings, public centers. It doesn't make any sense, but it's exactly what's said. And so this period went by, and in 1971, we had a new system. We had a new constitution. And for the first time, one of the nice things that happened, we had the culture, Ministry of Culture, alone, independent of the education ministry. And we also, in the Constitution, have the statement saying that the state has the rights to own and protect the historic, cultural, and natural materials. This is written almost in every, I think, in any constitution. State seems to be the big power protecting its cultural heredity. I'm not quite sure that's what's happening with many cultures, including ours. Though, a very important article that comes today is Article 64. It deals with another cultural issue, that of the rights of the artist. And just very recently, the other day, I was telling you about the Prime Minister going to a city and saying, this is very ugly, it has to be taken down. He has no right. The artist is given the permission to build a sculpture for the site by the historic preservation group there, and he's put it up, and then the Prime Minister comes and says, if he is the authority, that you can take it down because it doesn't look right. I am an artist. I don't think I have the right to say that. I think we all have to talk about it together, Okay, so at the same time, what is our relation with Europe? We are under UNESCO. We have contacts with a lot of people in Europe. And then the migration to Germany starts in 1950s. The peasants, so-called peasants, we still unfortunately use the word peasant, shouldn't, but use the word peasants, with very little education, were sent to Germany. They applied to go to Germany. They got their visas to come to Germany to work as workers here. But they didn't know how to read and write sometimes. Of course, they couldn't speak German, let alone speak Turkish sometimes. I'm not quite sure whether they were quite public people who talk to other people. They came from the rural areas. So they were Auslanders in every sense of the word. The migrant workers were discriminated for not adjusting to the newer conditions. Now, this is a very strong statement. But there are a lot of writings and talks and discussions about that. I think both parties are guilty of the fact that asking to have workers come to Turkey without any kind of upbringing, preparing for the new conditions, So there were some problems there. But what is also interesting, about the same time, we have been sending artists to Europe, young artists to Europe for their graduate studies in Europe. And we had a lot of artists coming and living in Germany, studying in Germany, and being successful among the Germans. The Germans accepted them as artists, not as Turks. The word Turk was erased off. It was artists. But for example, one artist, Hanefi Yeter, in the 700, I think there was a big exhibition in Berlin, 700-year founding of Berlin. There was a big exhibition, and the Turkish artist was among the artists they exhibited. I should say the artist who's very much now called bad names by our prime minister at the moment, Mehmet Aksoy, has a sculpture in Berlin, in one of the squares. And just very recently, he was asked whether they could do some sort of something over the sculpture to protect the sculpture. That just came up. So he lived here for a long time and did some sculptures for Germany and for Turkey, and then eventually he came back to Turkey. There's another artist living here at the moment, Azade Toner, a Turkish woman, who teaches at one of the art schools here. And he lives and works both in Ankara and Berlin. And just very recently, a couple years ago, she had a project called Ankara and Berlin Meeting. I think the Goethe Institute was backing it up as a project. So there were artists that were successful here. But eventually what I see is that the artists prefer to go back to their country, leaving their second country behind. I don't know what is the reason. Because usually with the new mega art going on, we have more people being more international and moving on in different circles and living and creating in the international centers. And yet I can see that the artists that have developed themselves as artists here in Germany eventually moved back to Turkey. Okay, this was one story with Germany. And in France, we had another group of artists going and living. They weren't as crowded as the artists in Germany. They were there for education. They stayed there. But there just 3-4 artists stayed to live on in France. So it's the conditions of each country that makes the decision for the artists. When we talk about UNESCO, I would like to quote from 2 people. One is Honorable Ambassador Pulat Acar. The other one is Honorable Professor Dr. Talat Halman. They both worked with UNESCO on high level of administration. And they said that UNESCO was an international agency with information. He wrote a book on UNESCO in its 50th year and talked about its disciplinary problem, interdisciplinary programs, and the development, the importance of development of education for the people. And he also said that the conventions suggested by UNESCO and signed by its members are for the development of equal rights for mankind in many fields. What's interesting is that Turkey ratified 9, non-ratified 14 conventions with 4 exceptions. I am, as a museum person, always confirm the people, give the information to the people about these conventions. What are these conventions? Are they rules that we have to apply in each country once we sign it? I have a feeling my government doesn't feel so. They sign under the conventions, and then they don't do anything about it. For example, this is one of the things, the freedom of artistic travel. We don't really travel so easy. Getting our artwork out of Turkey is a big trouble, you know. If we have the Ministry of foreign affairs backing us up, then it's simpler, it's much easier. But otherwise, as an artist, I have a big problem to take my work to anywhere, you know. So they are signing, but we are not getting our rights that way. Polat Acar, in an interview recently published in the Management of Cultural Politics yearbook of 2009 of Istanbul Big University, said that he expected more than he witnessed working with UNESCO under UNESCO. He was also very upset about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs not contributing to the artistic life of among its companions. He said the Minister of Foreign Affairs was like a stepson or a postman, just sending artworks or sending letters to the people, to the necessary circles to give information, but they were not really contributing to the artistic world. And he is, in my opinion, I think the Ministry of Culture and Tourism is worse in that way. We do not get much help from the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, whereas the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is more understanding about the cultural affairs among the nations. One thing they both wanted to emphasize is very important. UNESCO started as a very creative and productive organization with the intellectuals from different fields that member nations sent. And they had their name written on the table when they were all together discussing things. But at one point it changed in 1991. It made the people coming there representatives of the country. So it became more political rather than more cultural. So it became an arena where national priorities took over. So we have to know that multiculturalism is a very important thing in the information age. Preservation of cultural heritage, both material and immaterial. We need increasing budgets for the cultural development, for the development of cultural affairs. But on the other hand, I am an ICOM and IAP member, which means International Council of Museum and Association of International Association of Arts. Now, as an ICOM member, I'm very happy to say that ICOM is very, 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 very productive in showing the way to the museums how to deal with the public. It's not only heredity. It's not only what we have as in the collections or immaterial or material collections or nature, but you have to teach the people the value of cultural artifacts and arts, and therefore the museums are very important. And because they realize this is very important, this is very serious NGO in the world. I believe it's one of the strongest NGOs. I have attended their 3 meetings, and I get their bulletins. And the last image they wanted to give us was social harmony. And they do write about what they think about social harmony is. They let us know. And so when we have the meeting every 3 years, we are going to a new country. Last year, we were in China. A year before the last meeting, we were in Vienna. Another meeting was in Seoul. And we got to know the country as well as what they were doing there. And we also discussed the problems we have in our museums. Museology is not an easy thing. It's really hard. You have a very valuable items on this side, and you have the public on the other side, and you have to get them together. Okay, so I think I've been very proud to be a member of the ICAM. And they do have a lot of conferences for people to communicate. And the other one, International Association of Plastic Arts, is also under UNESCO. In Turkey, we have 1,500 members, but we have at least 3-4 times more artists living in Turkey. So they don't want to be members for some reason. But on the other hand, they try very hard to protect the rights of the artists that the Ministry of Culture doesn't. Ministry of Culture and Tourism doesn't. That's another issue. From 1971 on to the present, the Ministry of Culture has changed to Ministry of Culture and Tourism, back to Ministry of Culture, back to... We are not quite sure which is right. I think one of the main reasons we have Ministry of Culture and Tourism is that when you put them together, you get more budget money. And that's one of the reasons. Okay, what's happening in the arts in Turkey? 2010 was for Istanbul an important date as one of the European cultural capital. We had a lot of activities, but I'm not sure whether we got enough of what is called art and music in the wider area of Istanbul, although they tried it. There was some discussion very recently that some villages in Istanbul got more money for the activities, whereas others. This kind of discussion always takes over, always possible. I don't want to discuss that. But generally speaking, Turkey is still a big country. Many cities, many villages, and not enough artistic activity going on distributed equally in the country. The big cities get the best of it. Ankara, Istanbul, Izmir, even Izmir has fewer galleries than Ankara and Istanbul, although it's one of the economically developed cities. We did a research a year ago with my students, and they checked on the universities, how well the universities contributed to the art world of Istanbul. It was interesting. I didn't realize we had 38 universities plus 11 vocational schools, totaling up to something close to 50 universities, higher education. And one of my students sort of went around getting the numbers, what kind of activities they did between 2009 and 2010, June 2010. 7 universities in a period of, let's say, 18 months. There were 340 activities. But one of the universities was Bilgi, and it really had a lot of money, sorry to say, coming from Soros. And so therefore had visitors from other countries to come and sort of have a wider dialogue. We work with them on and off too, and they have also museum studies and managerial. Okay, this is my work. Before I go into the place of arts and music in Turkish society, which I did, I guess, I don't, oh yes, I can say a couple more things. Art activities are not only done by the universities, of course. Non-governmental organizations, 99 governmental organizations showed a sort of a doubled up their activities from 17 to 31. in 1 year. Two of the main reasons is that the coming of the 2010 Istanbul capital, okay, was that. And the other one, give me another 10 minutes, okay. Okay, so what happened is that the activities of the NGOs were not really as good as we expected them. One of the reasons was that they didn't get enough sponsors. NGOs don't get sponsors. Okay, now the subject of art is for everyone. Art is for everyone because, as Delacroix says, painting was no more than the pretext, the bridge between the mind of the painter and the mind of the spectator. So it's a bridge. Artwork is a bridge. It's a language. You might say that. And in order to answer these questions, we have to ask who, what, how. People are not completely ready to understand art or enjoy themselves in the museums or with the art until they have physical needs satisfied. And they have their own problems, security problems. I don't know whether you know anything about Maslow's triangle. The third level is the social level. That's when you start wanting to be with others. But before then, you have to take care of your physical needs and have a feeling of security. The world is uneducated. 1/6 of the world is educated. It's very recent. 1/6. And 4/5 of the world population is poor. 4/5. That's not bad, but uneducation is really down. A sense of comfort and belonging is needed for anyone to move on with new experiences. What kind of leisure time they need before they can fill their stomach and have a roof on their head. The technology affects the person-to-person relations among people. So we don't have personal touch. We don't communicate. And if I'm an artist, I'm putting my work somewhere, and they are afraid to come there. So what happens? Shall I put it on the internet? Maybe that's a solution. The information through the TV, internet, other devices move the mass culture to fast decisions with possible mistakes and not enough information. It's almost like having no experience or very poor experience. So you don't have any kind of value judgment, prejudices, and interpretations. If you are a person that is very young, you have less of the value judgments, less of the information for your evaluation, and possibly more prejudice. So there's a disconnection among the people. There's a disconnection with the younger generation. And you can use music and art to help this out. Now, visual images we see around us the strongest means of gathering information, visual. Second is sensations, hearing, including music. And so the third is the words. So we get less information through the words. It doesn't affect the people like the visuals, visual images, and like the sensations. So I think this is where our chance is as artists. Also, another thing we have to do is the subject matter in the arts. If we can organize exhibitions on subjects that the younger people feel, life cycles, everyday functions, objects, human relations such as family, relatives, home activities, friends, then we can get more of the feelings from the people, not reactions, negative reactions, but positive reactions. Then we have to have 6 basic motivations. 6 basic motivations, what are they? You have to have social interaction. You must feel comfortable with your environment. You must feel that you're doing something worthwhile. You must feel that you're learning something. And you must participate actively, and also face a challenge. So if you have these 6 things going on for you, you're motivated. How do you motivate the people? One of the big problems we have in the museums is if you divide the people according to the age group, the children we have to reach. If we reach the children, then you can reach to the family. So therefore, I believe in educating the children before anything else. And unfortunately, their experience in their life is a short time, 7, 8, 10 years. And they are also, they do not understand very abstract ideas like time. They don't understand history. They don't appreciate staying in the museum very long time. They don't appreciate being told what to do. Actually, the system should include constructive learning in the museum, asking the children to come up with questions. This is why we prepare papers for the teachers to teach their children how to learn constructively. They have to learn questions. They have to learn to ask questions. And they have to be excited, motivated to ask questions and answer. And of course, they have to be part of the group. They have to feel. So I'm just going over planning. I'm talking about target audiences according to age, children, youth, adults. I won't talk about youth and adults, but I think children are very important, that you reach to children, because through the children you will reach to their parents who are not living very much involved with the artists and art music sometimes. Now, when you're planning some activity like that, you have to reach, you have to make connections. That's very important. Schools are therefore very good for us to use. You have to motivate, you have to stimulate the people. So the subject matter has to be very interesting to the people. They have to participate. They have to do interactivity or hands-on projects. They have to share. Sharing is also very important. A sense of belonging and contributing is very important. This also works very well with the youth. Some museums in the States make projects with the young generation. They work in the archives. They organize a small exhibition. And so therefore they are very stimulated. And of course, the setting is very important. Setting is very important because most people, the children and the youth, disagree with the environment that forces them to be quiet, do not touch the objects, do not do that, do not do that. And so we have to have in a museum for the educating of the people a kind of a environment set up for them, copies for their works they can touch and very successfully feel part of the museum. I have done a project. We don't have time. I won't go into detail. We work with the NGO museum, our museum studies program, and NGOs, 3 NGOs that work with the poor families in the outskirts of Istanbul. And they were very well prepared to work with this kind of backgrounds. And so when we worked with the children in the museums, they knew what to do. And they really inspired the students to work. So I'm hoping that we also think in terms of volunteers that will also work with you in the future to make young people feel part of the project and be creative. Thank you. Sorry, I had to sort of